Here are various methods of capital punishment in the United States. A closer look at execution techniques. Capital punishment, or the death penalty, remains a controversial and divisive topic in the United States. While some argue for its deterrent effect and retribution, others highlight concerns about its morality, potential for error, and the evolving standards of decency. The methods used to execute individuals have evolved over the years, reflecting changes in societal attitudes and legal considerations. This article will explore the various methods of execution employed by states in the United States and address the sensitive question of which might be considered the most painful. Lethal injection. Lethal injection is the most common method of execution in the United States, used by a majority of states. It involves injecting a series of drugs into the condemned person's body to induce a rapid and painless death. The typical protocol includes an anesthetic to induce unconsciousness, a paralytic to immobilize muscles, and a drug to stop the heart. However, concerns have been raised about the potential for botched executions, as evidenced by instances where the administered drugs failed to work as intended. Electrocution. Electrocution was once a widely used method in the United States but has become less common in recent years. In this method, the condemned person is strapped to an electric chair, and a series of electric shocks are administered to induce cardiac arrest. Critics argue that electrocution can be a gruesome and painful process, with the potential for complications leading to a prolonged and agonizing death. Gas chamber. The gas chamber involves placing the condemned person in a sealed chamber and introducing lethal gas, typically hydrogen cyanide or a similar substance. This method has been criticized for causing convulsions, vomiting, and a painful death. States that still authorize the gas chamber as an option often face legal challenges due to concerns about its constitutionality. Firing squad. While less commonly used, some states still allow for execution by firing squad. In this method, a group of marksmen aim for the heart and chest of the condemned person. Proponents argue that it can be a swift and certain method, while opponents highlight the potential for psychological trauma among the executioners and concerns about accuracy. Hanging. Hanging was historically one of the most common methods of execution in the United States. In this process, the condemned person is placed on a trapdoor, and a noose is tightened around the neck, causing death by strangulation. While intended to be a quick and humane method, errors in judgment or equipment malfunctions can lead to a prolonged and painful death. The latest method. Execution by nitrogen, also known as nitrogen asphyxiation or inert gas asphyxiation, is a method of capital punishment that involves inducing death through a lack of oxygen rather than the administration of lethal substances. In this process, the condemned individual is placed in a sealed chamber filled with nitrogen gas, gradually displacing oxygen in the air, leading to oxygen deprivation. This description covers the unique aspects of execution by nitrogen, highlighting the absence of direct physical harm or pain-inducing substances. It emphasizes the method's reliance on inert gas to bring about a swift and seemingly peaceful death, potentially making it a distinct alternative to more traditional execution methods. The focus is on the physiological effects of oxygen deprivation, offering a detailed understanding of the process while acknowledging its place within the broader discourse on capital punishment. The controversy over pain. The question of which method is the most painful is highly subjective and depends on various factors, including the individual's physiology, the executioner's competence, and the circumstances surrounding the execution. As public opinion and legal standards evolve, ethical considerations also play a significant role. According to Independent News, 27 states across America still have the death penalty. They are Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, and Kentucky. Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. The latest execution took place in Missouri when Ernest Lee Johnson was executed by lethal injection at 6:11 p.m. despite objections from many, including the Pope, citing his intellectual disabilities. For many critics of the United States policy on the death penalty, one of the most troubling aspects is how inconsistently it's applied. While capital punishment is used in more than half of the country's states, in addition to the federal death penalty, the likelihood of an execution taking place and the potential for a prolonged, painful, or inhumane death if it does vary wildly. The frequency of people put to death is also markedly different across the country. Texas has put 573 people to death since 1976, according to the Death Penalty Information Center. Virginia comes in at a distant second, with 113 executions in that period, followed by Oklahoma with 112, Florida with 99, and Missouri with 90. Exacerbating the inconsistency, federal death penalties may or may not be carried out at all, depending on the views of the President or Attorney General of the time. The use of federal execution skyrocketed, with 13 inmates put to death. This is an astonishing figure, given that there has not been a single federal execution since 2003. Federal death row and a moratorium. Many argue that the constitutional concept of equal protection under the law is deeply compromised under this system. Due to the growing discomfort in the United States with the current state of affairs, the Attorney General issued a moratorium in July this year on federal executions while ordering a review of the Justice Department's policies. The Department of Justice must ensure that everyone in the federal criminal justice system is not only afforded the rights guaranteed by the Constitution and laws of the United States but is also treated fairly and humanely, adding, that obligation has special force in capital cases. In a memo to the Justice Department, he addressed the whiplash policy change by saying, "Serious concerns have been raised about the continued use of the death penalty across the country, including arbitrariness in its application, disparate impact on people of color, and the troubling number of exonerations in capital and other serious cases. Those weighty concerns deserve careful study and evaluation by lawmakers. In the meantime, the department must take care to scrupulously maintain our commitment to fairness and humane treatment. As it stands, that leaves the eventual fate of the 45 prisoners currently on federal death row hanging in the balance. Possible reform. Attitudes are changing in some states against the death penalty. A bill in Utah's state legislature would repeal and replace the practice, with Governor Spencer Cox admitting he may not block it. I've been supportive of the death penalty in the past, but certainly I've had to reevaluate my feelings about the death penalty, Governor Cox said last week. I think certainly any time we take a life, especially government taking a life, it's a very conservative thing to do to pause and make sure we get that one right. The move would remove executions and replace them with a 45-year to life prison sentence. The state currently has 7 prisoners on death row who would still face death even if the bill were carried. He stated, ongoing problems involving the willingness of pharmaceutical suppliers to provide drugs, as the reason for the delay, while a bill to commute the death sentence across the state is still being discussed. The Independent and the non-profit Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, RBIJ, have launched a joint campaign calling for an end to the death penalty in the U.S. Writing for The Independent today, the group's CEO, Celia Willett, makes it clear why the death penalty has to stop. The statistics that exemplify the death penalty's glaring flaws bear repeating here. It's ineffective. It states that practice has higher murder rates. It's incredibly expensive. To execute someone costs $2 million more than a life sentence. It's unacceptably error-prone. For every 8 people executed, 1 innocent person is exonerated. For example, death by firing squad is a possibility in South Carolina, while in Texas it may be a lethal injection of pentobarbital, which experts say can cause excruciating pain, such as in the case of the execution of Wesley Perkey in 2020. Across the 27 states that still use capital punishment, lethal injection is by far the most common method. But many pharmaceutical companies refuse to supply the required drugs, which has led to states authorizing deaths that are potentially far less humane. This has been the case in South Carolina, which in May instituted a law requiring death row inmates to choose between being put to death by electric chair or firing squad. They can only choose lethal injection if it is available at the time of the election, and it currently is not. Electrocution takes place in 8 states, and gas chambers are authorized in 7. 3 states, Delaware, New Hampshire, and Washington, still permit hanging. 4 states, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Utah, and South Carolina, allow for death by firing squads. These methods of capital punishment in the United States have evolved, reflecting changing societal attitudes and legal considerations. While lethal injection is currently the most prevalent method, concerns persist about the potential for pain and suffering in various execution techniques. The ongoing debate surrounding the death penalty underscores the need for a thoughtful and informed discussion on the morality, efficacy, and humanity of capital punishment in the United States. Please leave any comments and give this a thumbs up. It's free and will help us bring more articles like this. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.